All right, here we go. Hey, everybody, this is Clayton Olson, and I am here with my friend, colleague, and fellow coach, Jack Butler. Jack, good to have you on, brother.
It's good to be here. I'm excited for this conversation.
Me too. Me too. Offline, Jack and I were talking about a couple different ideas that we had for this live stream, and something that seems really relevant and important to speak to is something that comes up in almost all of my coaching conversations at one point or another in the relationship, especially as a complement to this kind of vision creation and going after what you want in life and trying to create the relationship, the life, the work that you love. And we are going to be talking about how to let go of outcomes and attract what you want, how to detach to attract. And what I'm really excited about, Jack, and especially talking with you about this, is because I think that you have some really great insights and wisdom around this idea of detaching from outcomes. So I'm really looking forward to picking your brain.
Yeah.
And, I'm curious, just hearing that intro, how does this land with you? Do you also notice that this is, in one form or another, comes up in the dialogues that you have with people?
I do. I do think this is a constant theme in coaching. Yeah. I think this is quite subtle territory in some ways, right? Because there's the ability to go after what you want. For some of us, we want to really access that muscle, right? Grow that muscle. But then there's also, how do you go after what you want, but not be attached to it, right? So I think this is a both and maneuver. If you're only non-attached or too detached, you may struggle to actually be in action on what's important to you. But we're saying, hey, how can you be in action on what's important to you, but then have some surrender and let life, the universe, kind of arrange things in right timing? So this is a real conversation. This is really the conversation at the heart of a lot of our lives. Like, how does life actually work for me, right?
Yeah, really great way of putting it. And as you're talking about this, what I notice is one of the models that I use when I'm working with people in a coaching dialogue is we're looking at the present state. So we're looking at the problem state, the things where people feel stuck, where you might be experiencing something that's unwanted. And then we're also looking at the desired state of what are all the things and the behaviors and the expressions and the physical manifestations, as well as the internal manifestations that you're wanting to move towards. And the key in this is, one of them is to make sure that we're not resisting the present state of things in order to get what we actually want. And another way of saying that is, how can we find and navigate into greater acceptance of where we're at? And how can we start to detach, and which ultimately helps us detach in moving in that direction of creating what we want more fully. So really looking forward to digging in. A question that I've got for you around this that I'd love to just kick off is, like, why do you think that this is a significant topic? As in, why is it important for someone's capacity to create to also have a ability to detach from the outcome? Like said another way, like, if you don't detach from the outcome, what are the consequences of that typically in your pursuit of creating the relationship, the love that you want, the work that you want?
Yeah. Well, typically you're going to be resisting reality, right? And you might be a really strong person, but reality is probably going to be stronger and more true than you ultimately, right? So, it's like, actually, Tony Robbins has like a classic way of saying this, right? He's like, if you're headed for a sunset, run in the wrong direction, right? It doesn't matter how hard or fast you run. It's just you're in the wrong direction. So what you might find, if you can't let things go, you might find that you hit burnout. You might find that you're generally working too hard. You might find that you can't switch off. You might find that you have a constant low-grade sense of frustration, right? That things should be a different way than that they actually are. And I think the territory that slips people up in here is this thing of non-attachment looking too passive to them, right? So the fear is, particularly to that part of you that wants to make it happen, manifest, and drive hard, the fear is, well, if I let go of the outcome could never happen. Right. So if I let go, for instance, of the idea of wanting to find a partner, if I let that go, it could never happen for me. So it's subtle territory. It's actually saying, Non-attachment doesn't mean you have to fully preclude or the possibility of something happen. It's actually just saying you're not so attached to it having to look a certain way or happen in a certain timing. In a sense, we say you're no longer allowed to be the mini god of your own world. Ooh. That life is bigger than you, so you need to stand down and let life have its way with you, with its bigger forces of the divine plan, or however you think of that could unfold through you, if only you stopped playing mini god. We've done mini god. You were good at it. You did a great role. Now it's time to be really spiritual and step out of the way. That's hard.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. What's coming up for me as you say that is, we can land this to maybe some of our viewers that are watching right now. Let's say that you really want something to happen with a particular person that you're dating or that you've been in connection with. Or let's say that you're in the new stages of being single, or maybe you've been single for a while and you have your sights set on a relationship. Yeah. And this is one of the things that I'm here to do. Like, maybe other parts of my life are taken care of and handled, and I need to create a relationship in order to feel complete, feel satisfied, feel loved. How am I supposed to detach from that? Right. And I get that there's an underlying belief there that one might think that it's all on them to create this.
Yeah.
That they have to be the one muscling through the creation process. And if they take their eye off the ball at any moment, that it will all fall apart, and all the work that they've done so far will just collapse, and there will be nothing that kind of supports them. And what I'm hearing you say, which is the metaphor that just comes to my mind right now, is that detachment seems to be almost like this way of falling into a free fall and then spreading your wings and allow aerodynamics to actually catch you, and to allow life and physics to support the uplift of the direction that you're going, rather than thinking that it's all on you to fly.
Yeah.
And I think that's an incredible amount of trust.
Yeah.
Incredible amount of trust and faith in something. So,
I mean, I invite people to run the experiment. I'm a fan of experiments, right? So you've got your current way of doing your life, right? Which I'm slightly provocatively calling mini God, but call it what you want. You're kind of hustling hard for the outcome. Why don't you run the experiment? You have to run it for long enough, I think, for it to be a true experiment, to see if there's a different way of being in the way that you're talking, where you're going to be less attached to the outcome. You can still work hard. You can still be super passionate. You can still really want something and connect with your authentic desire for it. But you're also going to try and say, well, if life wants this to happen, then a path will appear, some doorways will open. And see, you've always, the great thing about current ways of being is, as I look at it, they're always in the locker, right? You can always keep doing the thing that you've been doing. But if you notice that you feel a lot of low-grade frustration, burnout, that you're always trying too hard, that you're sort of always imagining that fulfillment is somewhere in the future, right, rather than in the present, then we're saying, well, check this out. And you could even have them side by side, right? You could have a way of being that's like, no, I'm going to absolutely find a way or make a way. I'm just going to hustle this until it happens. And there are some things in life that are amenable to that, but there are also some things that aren't amenable to that. And it might be that that's actually going to teach you more, and it's more in the domain of something you haven't currently got in your life. So you don't have to believe what we're saying. We're saying try it and find out for yourself. And if you prefer it, it's there in the toolkit. And if you don't, you can always go back. But I think most people prefer it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I'd love to break this. So I love that invitation, and I love the idea of a trial period, right?
Yeah.
That, hey, we're inviting you to try something that for all the parts that are listening that have resistance to this, just try it on for 30 days.
It's very inclusive, Clayton. I didn't know if you're going to include all my difficult parts.
I'm going to include all your difficult parts, Jack. That's what I have to do in order to be in dialogue with you. But just realize that this is a trial period of actually stepping back, and Jack's saying not a passive resignation, and also not a tolerance for what is, but almost like, I think this is where this idea of prayer can be so powerful as a mechanism to detachment, where you say a prayer or you put your intentions out there to whatever it is that you believe may be a higher power than yourself. And by putting your intentions out there, you give it over to something larger than you, larger than your small self, larger than your small self concept named Clayton or Jack.
Yep.
And then you just allow the universe to have its way with that intention.
Yep.
And I think that's a beautiful invitation. I want to just read a couple quotes here that I had around this. So non-attachment is not the elimination of a desire. It is the spaciousness to allow any quality of mind, any thought or feeling to arise without closing around it, without eliminating the pure witness of what is happening. By a guy named Stephen Levine.
That's good.
Another one. Non-attachment is self-mastery. It is freedom from desire for what is seen or heard. And that's an interesting one, talking about backing away from desire a little bit. Here's another one. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say something super quick on that, right? It's easy to be in the perspective that either to be fulfilled or myself, like that I should get what I want. And I'm not sure that life is a process of I should always get what I want. Sometimes you can learn a lot by not getting the thing that you want. Sometimes the thing you want isn't really the thing that you wanted. Sometimes the thing that you wanted it for the wrong reason. So there's a lot of space in that. But I think if we don't examine it, we can get frustrated because we're like, well, there's a thing I want. I'm not getting it. So therefore, I'm a failure or life is against me. And I know that, and I'm sure there's so many things I don't know, but like about tough experiences in life where you feel like, gosh, life is really resisting this, or this is super hard. This is almost trusting that if something is an authentic desire through time for long enough, maybe there'll be some way that it can be met, and maybe there even won't. And that actually there's a sort of freedom in that. The unfreedom is thinking, I should always get what I want. As if your desire is the sort of highest law of the land. Well, think about it. Like some people don't survive childhood. I mean, there's so many ways that people don't get what they want, because life is more than just getting what you want. That's my sense of it. I'm curious what you think of that.
Yeah, I'm in accordance with that, and I also think that there's another piece of this too. Is that how many of us listening right now, as Jack speaks, can relate to thinking that you wanted something, and then when you gotten it, it actually didn't deliver the feeling or the internal state that you were hoping
I've had that so commonly.
And then also, how about this one? How about when you didn't get what you thought you wanted, but you got something you couldn't even imagine instead that ended up being way more fulfilling than even your idea of what the original thing would have done to you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think just even playing with that idea, again, like almost, dethroning desire, dethroning the desire, really curious about what it is that's driving our motivations and why do we really want it? And I will say this, that I think one of the things that keeps people attached to an outcome is in order to sequence that they're running in their mind, right? So I was working with a wonderful woman last week around relationship, and we went through this deepening of like, why does she want a relationship? And one of the things she was saying, well, this is a missing piece of my life, and when I finally get the relationship, I'll feel the love that I've been wanting to feel my whole life, and I'll feel the freedom, and I'll be able to be myself, and I'll be able to be so much more connected to my family and everybody. And now notice, like, wow, of course one is going to be attached to the outcome of trying to manipulate and get this external outcome. If what exists is a permission to be yourself right now in the present moment. So when we start to see these attachments, these ideas that, oh, when I get this, or in order to feel this way, I have to get this amount of money. In order to feel this way, I have to get this person or be in this type of relationship. When we can see the illusion in that and start to really question the premises by which those thoughts are built, I think that can start to lead to more of a detachment and being a little bit more in the question of, am I sure that thing's actually going to do this for me? Am I absolutely sure?
Yeah, totally. I think that's great. One other example I'll just throw in there is the sense that when I finally get into relationship, it will solve my anxiety. I've heard this one quite commonly, right? So I'm imagining like I'm alone, I'm anxious, and I know what that experience can be like. That can be really difficult. Imagination is, once I find that person, I'll basically feel good and I'll no longer feel so anxious. Then gets into a relationship and finds, oh gosh, not only am I still anxious, but also he has anxiety, and sometimes we're doubly anxious together. It's actually worse. So not only did I not get the, sort of warm blanket that I was hoping for, or there's the kind of the security or the sort of end to my angst, it's like actually sometimes I'm even more anxious.
Yes.
So yeah, that can be a difficult place to be. The other thing that I just want to throw in there is that sometimes the basic desire, right? So maybe the desire to be whole or complete or fulfilled is sometimes a cover up for the basic fear, right? So actually what's driving the basic desire of, I want to feel whole is like the fear that I'm not complete, I'm not okay. So it can be interesting to examine if your desire is so strong that it's almost like you can't but imagine it has to happen. What is really driving that? And sometimes it might actually be, if you dig even deeper, there's a fear that you haven't been in contact with, right? So even just super quickly to go a little into an Enneagram perspective on that, right? As an Enneagram 7 and wanting to explore the possibilities of the world, it's not obvious. You have these big ideas of what you want to do, that actually underneath that might be a lack of trust that I can get what will nourish me. It's like, what's that? No, I'm dreaming of building a company, or I'm dreaming of doing something really cool. But why do I need to do that? Well, because it's going to be awesome. Okay, but let's keep digging deeper. What's not awesome about now, or where you are in your life currently? So I'm just sort of opening that up, that sometimes the things you really, really want may also be covering more difficult terrain that you might actually be able to step more directly into. And then the thing that you want will look different already.
Yeah. Beautiful. Said another way, when you start to accept and find peace with exactly where you're at, the thing that you want may transform and change into something completely different. It ends up being born from a different fuel source.
That's it. It's like a different origin. Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I would love for us to just go a little bit into why I believe, and I'd love to hear from you too. Like, why do you believe that when we're attached to an outcome, it actually gets in the way of the creation of it? What we've been doing so far is, in some ways, I think, creating some flexibility around maybe even questioning what that desire is, and really getting like, okay, is it really going to do what we think it is? Let's imagine that the desire is something that it's like, yeah, I want to create this in life. And sometimes I'm attached to the outcome, and sometimes I'm not attached to the outcome. What happens for us when we're attached to the outcome? And I've got a couple things I just want to put out here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So when we're attached to the outcome, we tend to lose flexibility and become rigid. When we're attached to an outcome, there's a way in which we are operating from a place of lack, and we come from a need more even so than a want. So it's like, God, I need this to happen. I need to get into this relationship, which can actually end up creating kind of a fight or flight response that creates this myopic view on what's in front of us. And what that does is it stops from seeing opportunities in the periphery, right? We end up becoming a pit bull on something. And that rigidity can actually stop us from getting what we want, because we can't be flexible to read the signs and collaborate with that thing that we want in a spontaneous and alive way. Another thing I'll say too is that, it really reduces our resourcefulness. That's another way of putting it. Our resourcefulness and our creativity is online when we're more at peace, which just naturally aids in our ability to navigate the inevitable obstacles that come up as we're moving towards what it is that we want.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. I mean, the actual immediate metaphor that comes up for me, and people may not know that you and I occasionally watch a little bit of the UFC, right? Like the fight game, right? I'm not a fighter in that way, but I understand. And you see them at the beginning of the fight. What are they trying to do? They're trying to stay loose, right? Because they don't want to tense up, which is counterintuitive because they're about to hit someone really hard, right? So even in that sort of high stress pressure situation, they're still trying to stay loose and relax. And in a sense, they often, for want of a better word, they're trying to Aikido things, right? So like they want to roll with the punches, so to speak. So I think having that kind of flexibility and looseness totally useful. It's hard though, right? Because when you're anxious, it's the tendency is to want to tense and contract. You actually relax and breathe into that and create space. And particularly if the thing that you've wanted is something that you've wanted for like a long time, right? So this is not just like you saying, hey, Jack, can I have a sweet? And I say no, and you ask tomorrow and I give it to you, right? This is sort of like, hey, Jack, can I have a sweet? And you might have been asking that question for weeks, months, maybe years, and it still hasn't happened. That's where I think people say it's difficult to feel trust and flexibility when it's been like so long and I've tried so hard, right? And so that's, I think, the sort of maybe the counterintuitive place where people could almost like, well, why not just let it go at this point and just experiment? Because you've for 10 years you've been saying you want this thing and you've been so clamped down on it, it hasn't happened.
Yes.
Would you lose anything if just for 3 or 6 months you said, well, okay, I'll let it go?
Yes.
So yes, I agree. Sorry to loop back to you. I agree. Yes, with the kind of the myopia. I agree with the resourcefulness. I think that's a great metaphor. And maybe just one thing I'll throw back in there just to be sort of specific about the language. I tend to use this phrase non-attachment and distinguish it from detachment because I do think they are slightly different.
Okay.
I think non-attachment is I'm not attached to the outcome, right? So it's not that I'm not engaged. I'm just not attached to where it's going. Detachment, I think, typically is a bit more of like I'm stepped back and I've sort of like someone who's detached from dating is probably not dating, right? And they're probably almost close to it. Rather than non-attached dating is I could date or not, and if I am dating, it could go somewhere or not, right? There's more openness throughout the experience. So sometimes I think people detachment solves like a broken heart, right? If I had my heart broken and then I go, okay, I'm sort of going to detach, close down. And you know, this is words. It doesn't have to be this way, but whatever you call it, I'm trying to distinguish something that I think is useful to say. Sometimes people say, well, I'm just not meant to be with someone in this lifetime, right? Well, it's like, well, non-attachment would be, I don't know. Let's see. Detachment is I've sort of already decided that I'm not going to be, and therefore I'm kind of closed. So I don't have to be open to the possibility that it won't work out and experience the pain of that. Does that register as different? Yeah.
It does, yeah. And you know, I'm attached to the title we have for this video.
Yeah, there we go. I knew it.
So I'm not going to be changing the title of this video, but I really like your distinction. And
awesome.
Yeah, I think it's nuanced, and it really does point to a maneuver that people make where they may be thinking of being non-attached, but in essence, in some ways, it's almost like they're resisting still.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah, to protect themselves. And I think it is useful depending on what context it is, right? It's useful.
Yes. I was trying to say you can't do it. Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's just doing it consciously rather than thinking you're doing one thing and you're actually doing another.
Another thing that's ironic too about this is like you bringing up the UFC fighter thing. I literally got off a coaching call 15 minutes before this, and I was using that analogy.
Oh yeah.
With my client of being able to be completely relaxed, and this idea that if you're really attached to your fist hitting somebody, there's going to be a way that you might lose your balance as you end up actually fighting or throwing punches. And for those of you that don't like fighting, we can bring this into dating a little bit too, because I think there's a way of or watching fighting. I don't know if anybody really likes fighting, but in dating, one of the things that I've encouraged clients to do if they come to me and they've been in this place of I've been trying for a relationship for so long, and they're dating and they're coming across, prospect after prospect, and it's not going anywhere. If you're really attached to the outcome of like finding your person, dating is painful and it's exhausting because 99% of it is going to be calculated as failure because you're only looking at one person, looking for one person. So one of the ways to practice non-attachment in that is to begin to change the focus of why you're actually dating. Yes. And I think that's what you're talking to, right? Is actually how can we start to set up experiments, social experiments, connection experiments, where you're going out and your focal point is not to see whether or not this person's the one or whether or not this is going to work out, but maybe it's there to practice an internal skill of showing up in more of your truth, speaking your needs, maybe making real-time reflections to somebody, teaching them how to communicate with you in a way that works for you and collaborates. So that kind of movement of the goal line can then be a practical application to move us into non-attachment.
I love that. Yeah.
Lastly, and I want to move into also just how we can start to practice this non-attachment. One last thing I wanted to say, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I've noticed that when people are attached to outcomes, including myself, when I find myself attached to an outcome, I am much more susceptible to divorcing from my authentic self in pursuit of that thing. Right? Where all of a sudden it's just like the fighter who is like really attached, it starts to lose their balance. If I'm attached, I'm way more susceptible to doing something that I'm not proud of, showing up in a reactive way, saying something I don't mean, almost living into the paradigm that the ends justifies the means, which actually I believe is one of the biggest limitations of my power to create. Because, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, I believe our capacity to create what we want is directly related to our ability to be ourselves in pursuit of that thing. And if I'm being a shell of myself or some inauthentic version of Clayton trying to create something, I don't stand a chance, truly. Like, it's not going to happen. The relationships aren't going to build deep. The things I say are not going to land in a way that I want them to land. So that coming back to me and clearing that distortion is super important.
Yeah, I like that. I agree. Yeah, it sounds like you're saying the more you're in your authenticity, the more you're in your authentic creative power, and that you're more impactful, things land, you create from a different place.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I'm sure there are some kinds of partial truths in there, right? So is every person who's highly productive in a sort of typical success way super authentic all the time? I'm not sure that that's true, but I'm not sure that they're bringing the quality of sort of wholesome creativity that you might be talking to, you know? So
it doesn't lead to some type of betrayal of self.
I think from a self-development perspective, absolutely. Yeah. Or just such a disconnection from self that you wouldn't even recognize your real self.
Yes.
Sort of obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. I want to rattle off a couple of like reframes or maybe some things that could help us move to non-attachment. And I'm curious if there's any one of these that you want to comment on, or if there's something that it inspires that feels similar. Where I'd like to move into, and I'm curious if this feels congruent with you, is what are some practical ways we can start thinking or ways we can start behaving to create more non-attachment to outcomes?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's
cool.
get tactical. I'm curious what's going to come out.
Got it. So here's what I'm thinking. So number one, just remember, there's a very good reason you don't have what you want yet, and it has nothing to do with life punishing you. So this starts to look at ecology, that perhaps the thing that you want hasn't shown up in your life yet for a very good reason that you're not privy to yet. And if you can get privy to that very good reason, you can have more appreciation for the present state of things. Another one.
Does that mean you would have to know what that reason is, or just sort of stay open-minded that there could be a reason that hasn't yet been revealed to you?
I think both are possible paths, and maybe chronologically staying open to it could reveal it. For instance, if we're staying in the realm of relationship, or maybe let's actually move into the realm of like, let's say maybe somebody moving into a greater responsibility in their work, or maybe starting a business. Maybe that hasn't happened yet because there's a way in which your system's not ready yet for the type of responsibility and possible feelings of entrapment that you will ultimately crash into through taking on this new project, right? Or your system's not necessarily actually is honoring freedom and lifestyle over what feels like it's going to be a grind to create that thing that you're wanting. And if you're just focused on the fact that we haven't created that thing yet, we're not in appreciation of maybe the life that we've built, the freedom that we have, the lifestyle and the leisure that's possible in our life. And we can turn against ourselves. But when we can see that maybe we're honoring something else that is up until this point felt more important to our system, we can start to say, oh, now I really get why I haven't been fully aligned in creating this thing or getting this thing at this point.
So it sounds like a more sort of wide perspective appreciation for like everything that is in your life, and not just a sort of hyper focus on the thing that you haven't yet got. Am I picking that up right? Yeah.
Yes, totally. How like a relationship, for instance, might lead to like if you have a history of feeling like you lose yourself in a relationship, right? It might be that, you're keeping a relationship at bay because maybe you don't quite yet have the strategies or the belief to not fully lose what you need and be in touch with your desires and be able to communicate them. So with good reason, you've been keeping relationship at bay up until this point.
Got it. Yeah. So that's almost like something you're doing unconsciously, sort of, maybe, versus like the universe hasn't created the opening for the right timing for this thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But you're inviting people to not feel like they're being punished, because I see that pattern's quite common.
Yes. Yeah. The punishment piece.
Yeah. It's almost like, I think it goes a little bit with mini God, right? Because if I'm really just the ultimate kind of creator of everything that's happened in my life, and then if I don't have the things that I want, it's sort of like, oh, life is kind of blaming me or punishing me in some ways. So that the movement towards non-attachment also, I think, goes with the ability to relax the inner critic more, because it's sort of a bit like, well, who knows? You might not have that thing because it was never meant to happen for you, or the right opening for it hasn't yet occurred. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you want to sail from, I don't know, England to America, right? At some point, they needed to have the technology even to do that. And it's not until the technology comes online that there's certain things you can even do. Do you know what I mean? So there's a little bit of like, the less responsible you have to be for all the outcomes in your life, the more you can actually be kind to yourself, I think, when it doesn't go the way that you want.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. And I love that, that distinction of just looking at the wider system and actually taking stock of like what is actually possible right now in terms of maybe the resources that I have within me. Versus listening to the inner critic who's just beating you up and maybe comparing yourself to other people, looking at social media, thinking that you're on the same track as somebody else who's in a relationship, and why hasn't happened for you yet?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It also cuts both ways, right? So the more you can relax the inner critic, also the more you have to relax your pride that you're so great in some ways at things, right? Because it's the same, it's the sort of the inverse of the same thing. So, even just an example from our world, right? You and I know what it's like to sort of catch the YouTube algorithm and write things, and also when you're kind of on the other side and the waves are doing less, right? But it's like, things aren't really aligning. So you could take that super personally, like, oh, when I'm up at the top of the wave, didn't I do so great? But then when I'm down at the bottom of the wave, oh, because I'm so bad. It's like, no, actually, it's just none of that, really. It's just forces. It's just life. It's not always just you.
You don't think it's your mental capacity that's kind of slipped in your late 30s? And that's why
that's also possible. I like that. That's quite a logical explanation.
Totally.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, for people who become super quickly famous, let's say, right? Like, there's a pro and a con to that, right? And the con might be that if you don't sustain that, it might be because it's not actually just all of your own doing. You know? So I think you said differently. We're talking about co-creating with life and partnering with life, and not holding it quite so much in the it's all about me.
Yes.
Right. And it's all about me can even be true, even if you're a very selfless person. It's all about me can be, oh yeah, but it's my fault, or I feel guilty, and we're actually saying, let's relax that structure so that you don't carry so much of life on your back all the time. Some days you're going to win. Some days you won't. Some days you'll be super smart. Some days you'll be dumb. It's a little bit of like freeing up that you don't have to crush it all the time.
Yeah. And another thing I'm hearing in all this is like, stop taking responsibility for like the results that you don't have 100% control over.
I think so.
Right? Like, maybe we can, again, and I think this is where we get the difference between like finite thinking and infinite thinking. The finite thinking, goal-oriented, I'm not okay until I get this thing. I'm incomplete until I get this thing. The infinite thinking is, who am I becoming on this journey? And what am I actually responsible for? And if you start to think that you landing the relationship, landing whatever type of result it is completely within your control, then you're actually deviating from your lane of power, and you're distorting how reality actually works. Yeah.
Well, particularly how reality works at this stage of development. So it might be that in a previous stage of development, mini God was needed.
Yeah.
But I think most people listening right now are graduating or have graduated.
Yes.
It's my sense.
So this might be a really great point to move into these two different paradigms. So, or actually, the four stages that we've talked about in Becoming the One, actually, which is the ladder of surrender. We create this concept, but we've taken it and we've applied it into the realm of relationship. And I'll just kind of set it up, just the beginning part. The first stage of consciousness is life is happening to me, which is I'm living in the question as things happen. Why is this happening to me? What did I do to deserve this? Not again. Here it happens again. What's wrong with me? There's a way in which we are seated in victim consciousness as life is occurring around us. The next stage that Jack is talking about when you speak to becoming a god, or like being mini gods of our world, which can be quite empowering to help someone take responsibility and get out of victimhood, is moving into life is happening by me. So life is happening by me is I ask the question, okay, how am I creating this? And how am I creating that? And how is it that that everything exists, all of reality exists within my mind, and it's just me thinking the right way and being the right way in order to create what I want in life. And that's a beautiful, empowering perspective. It's so useful in certain contexts. But then typically something happens in life where it gets really lonely, in my opinion, and it can get really stressful. Where does someone navigate from that place to move into this next realm?
Yeah. Well, I like that you've actually double clicked on the fact that it can be really empowering and kind of beautiful. Like I sometimes think of By Me a bit like being in college. Like it was some of the best years of my life in certain ways, even if now I think I live with more kind of truth and beauty in other ways. It's like an interesting experience. So you might start to notice that you're having to hold your own world up all the time. So the process of relaxing By Me and coming more into this, life happens through me, or what we call through me, this more kind of surrendered co-creative thing. It might be that you start to notice that you want to partner more with life, right? You want to notice more what doors are opening, what doors are closing, what seasons are coming, what seasons are ending, what season are you in internally, where are you meeting the external season? Do you know what I mean? Rather than that you're just always kind of just going gung-ho for your goals, it's sort of realizing, life has got some stuff it's going to want to teach you. Your goal might be, build the business, have the relationship, start the family. Life might also have a goal that we want you to learn about forgiveness, right? Or we want you to learn about trust, or we want you to learn about grief. And that's not typically in people's life plan, right? Yeah. So this was ultimately,
dude, so profound, right? I mean, just really get that. Like, who is consciously saying, hey, you know what? I want to learn about grief right now, or I want to learn about forgiveness through being betrayed. And that is, and to just notice like the importance and the significance of learning about these things that happen in life that we would never consciously want. I think there you start to build some flexibility and questioning around, do I know that what I want actually is in service of my best, highest self? Please continue.
Probably not. Well, what I was thinking is actually, well, you might know this, like in my very early days in personal growth, I was involved in promoting some of Tony Robbins' seminars, right? When I'm like 21 years old. And he's got this little formula. I don't know why I'm talking about him today, but clearly he's here. So, and it's something like BP equals LC, blueprint, your idea about what your life should be, equals LC, life conditions. So basically your idea about life and life are showing up as the same thing. That's happiness. Now, at a By Me stage of reality, it is, because it's basically saying, everything you want is happening and we're good. But we're sort of talking about, well, what happens when what you want isn't happening? And what about when there's bigger learnings that aren't even to do with your blueprint? So when you start to get into through me, you're a little bit less interested that your blueprint is how life has to show up. And you start to treat your life more like a movie. Let's watch it and let's find out like what's going to be the next chapter. If I knew everything about the movie ahead of time, it's less interesting. You tell me about a good movie. I say to you, whoa, don't tell me. I might want to watch it. Don't tell me what happens. But if you already know now, well, I know what my life is going to look like when I'm 70 years old. I don't know if that's interesting. it's like it's a certain way of doing reality. Like, yeah, you might want to know that maybe you've got enough pennies in the bank that you could retire or something like that. But do you see what I mean? It's like you treat yourself like an open-ended system. Who you are in your 40s doesn't have to be who you were in your 30s. Who you are in your 60s doesn't have to be who you were in your 20s. It's a much more trusting the unfolding of yourself to allow the fact that you might not recognize yourself in a good way, not in a bad way because I got away from myself, but in a like, oh, more has been revealed that I didn't even know was going to be revealed to me.
Yeah. The word that comes to mind is metabolize. And this perspective that you're speaking to feels like one of the ultimate perspectives to metabolize any experience. Breakups, divorces, death, job loss, economic changes,
health
COVID, challenges. Right. Like, I mean, who could have said, hey, you know what I want this virus to, come in and affect the entire world. Right. And yet
sure thing.
with that, if we're in the buy me reality, we end up moving into blame of self or like real confusion. How did I create this? Right. But the through me reality you're speaking to, one is like almost like, how can I use this? How is this here for me? How is this another curriculum that is being delivered to me by some intelligence or some force that is far more connected to what should be happening than I am?
Yeah. I mean, I think what prevents us doing that, both from my own experience of this, like I think of critical moments where it did feel to me like I'm jumping off a cliff and I don't really know what's going to hold me. Or I sometimes hear clients talking about it like, okay, so you're asking me to kind of step up the stairway, but I can neither see the steps nor have a handrail, right? So it's almost like life without the training wheels or the stabilizers, right? And so it's less certain, but that we're actually noticing that less certainty in this situation might be what we need, right? Because there's all ways that we want to create certainty so that we can feel safe. And this is actually saying, let's examine your relationship with certainty. Part of your growth and development might be, we don't quite know what this is going to look like, or we don't quite know what timeline this opportunity may come, or whether your authentic desire is going to be realized or not. And you actually don't need to know that, but it's going to feel really uncertain. And that's why you might not choose to do it. You might want to go back to either victimhood or to mini God, buy me, because that's kind of certain. Because when it's like, well, it's me or no one, even if I'm struggling, there's a kind of certainty to that. Whereas this is saying, well, you're involved and you've got to participate and you might have to work hard, but also there's a lot of life that's showing up,
How do you think that someone can develop a more robust relationship with uncertainty?
Well, partly through an authentic desire, right? Sort of meaning, I don't know how common it is, even though I think I've worked with clients, for people to say, I'm taking aim at relaxing my need for certainty. I don't think that's a learning aim that most people hold. So they've probably A, not had it, and B, not given themselves much permission to learn it. Like, learning that is quite a profound thing, right? This is not, oh, I had a breakthrough moment on the weekend. This is like, it's probably going to be sustained awareness and practice through time. You can practice simple things, right? Even let's say you're someone who gets uptight when people are late, right? And I've had some of this. What about relaxing that? What about getting to enjoy those minutes and treating it as self-time? What about like, okay, I got to be present with myself for 10 more minutes. You can still have a cutoff, right? There's maybe a time where you say, okay, I'm kind of done. But that's likely to be part of your life. So why not get a little bit more flexible about it, right? Relationship to certainty could be that you specifically have times you don't schedule yourself, right? We know this when I used to live in Boulder. I do freewheel Sundays. Don't know what I'm going to do. Wake up, and you might say, well, that's a luxury to have a whole Sunday. I've got 3 kids. Well, okay, maybe you can only do it for an hour or 2 hours or an afternoon or an evening, whatever works. But it's having a relationship with, I don't need to have, I don't just treat my life like it's just a series of tasks. I'm actually going to get a bit more connected to the moment, and the moment might inform me, oh yeah, I feel really active. Why don't I go move? Or I feel really tired. Why don't I rest? Or I feel inspired. Let's write a poem. or I feel a bit disconnected. Let me connect with someone. Do you know? Like, so actually not prefiguring your whole life in your head in advance. And I think just practicing tolerating some of the feelings of anxiety, because that's probably what's underneath the desire for certainty, right? Is I feel anxious, and so I can solve it with getting more certain. And that you see this even in the collective, right? People feel anxious, and then someone comes along, I won't mention any names, but says some very certain things, like the world is a certain way. And I think it's attractive to people because they're like, oh gosh, I've been so anxious, now I've got some certainty. I think it's the same thing that operates inside us. You can always create certainty to solve the anxiety, but we're always going to be in the same hamster wheel. So we might have to go directly to the anxiety and start to presence it, even if you can only do it for 30 seconds. And then you go back to your normal ways. So it's shifting your relationship with your own doubt and anxiety by practicing being more present to it, naming it and narrating it, and getting a little comfortable with the uncomfortability in service that you're going to have a much more comfortable relationship, you know? So in my language, breaking the anxiety action loop, not displacing anxiety into action, but actually trying to presence it. And it's hard, particularly if you are under time pressure, money pressure, relational pressure, health pressure, home pressure. It's hard. So I'm not saying I can make it sound easy, and I'm not saying it's always easy, but I think it's really worthwhile. What do you think? Does that resonate?
Yes.
You disagree, don't you? I can see it.
I
That's
disagree.
Right. That's allowed. That's allowed. I'm not attached.
Champion for attachment. No, there's two things that come up. One is I'm realizing something that inspired by this conversation that I think is interesting is one way to stop attracting or being magnetic to narcissists is to develop a more robust relationship with uncertainty, because a narcissist can exploit your compromised relationship with uncertainty. So if you have not erected your own kind of leadership and capacity to be in the unknown from a place of grace and balance, that anxiety can drive you into attaching to somebody because they're certain that is ultimately toxic and not good for you. So that's thank you for that. Connection. Inspired that just based on some of the things you said. And I'm realizing that one of the ways that I've worked with a client before that was had some rigidity around their days and their planning and felt like they needed to do that in order to be safe. And one of the things that we started experimenting with was had them buy like a coin, an actual silver coin, and flip it and go outside and actually allow the coin to dictate where they're going.
Oh, I like that.
They can create the path and say, okay, I'm either going to go in this coffee shop or I'm going to go around the corner. I'm going to keep walking. And they flip the coin and they would just see where life would guide them. And so they would practice handing over control in a controlled experiment to something outside of themselves that allowed them to be comfortable. And, I've done this myself personally, and it is pretty miraculous the kind of places that life can lead you that aren't necessarily from your conscious mind. And suddenly you might end up starting a conversation with somebody in a restaurant or coffee shop, or you might go somewhere where there's just a profound sense of peace and you're practicing allowing something to hold you other than just your decisions.
Yeah.
It's pretty beautiful.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah, I actually remember having quite a profound experience of that as it happens way back in the day when I went to Burning Man. I think it was the first time in my life where I didn't even have a watch, so I didn't even know what the time was. And obviously there's a lot that happens at night there. And just this sort of sense of like spontaneity, connecting with someone, and suddenly they're like going to this place. Now we're meeting some other people, just very...
Totally.
Probably the closest I've got in my life to whatever Jack Kerouac was talking about. Maybe not close, but in my life close. So yeah, like that's the same spirit of that Free Will Sunday. It's just the tuning into a slightly different frequency. I think there's a presupposition unnamed in society at large, which is it's almost like a bit of a robotic assumption about who we are, right? Like I all these tasks, love my to-do list, follow my calendar, should get up, work from the same amount of time to the same amount of time, pretty much most every day, but then on the weekends do like a different thing. And some of that is just time-honored, human cultural wisdom. So I'm not chucking it out, but just sort of saying, I don't know. I don't have a presupposition that I'm a machine or a robot, So some days you might have more energy. Some days you might not. Some days you might really feel inspired for certain things. Some days you might not. And sort of allowing a little bit more of where am I actually, rather than, well, I should be doing this right now because it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so I should be working. And I get it. We don't all have the same level of flexibility on our schedule. But just even for me, right, as someone, and I've been self-employed my whole life, basically, I still sometimes have a thing of like, well, it's late in the afternoon. I should still have energy for work, but the reality is right now I don't. But then maybe 2 hours later, if I listen to myself, I do, and I come back way stronger. So it's this kind of interesting self-listening, sort of almost trusting where you are in the moment. Whereas the mind sort of like, well, if you don't do it now, you'll never get it done, or you should be doing. And like, so you can practice this in a very micro way, just in how you move through your day.
Yes.
In a more self-honoring kind of way.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's so much medicine in what you're talking about there, because I have struggled with that this last year, having moved and just noticed myself handling a bunch of different routines and tasks. And I noticed, and this is maybe taking it to another level as well, is like this idea of non-attachment around who I think I am.
100%.
Like I had, and I noticed this, I had an attachment to myself in my 20s of who I was. And there was a way in which I wanted to stay on brand to that. And then there was an attachment I had to being an entrepreneur. Yeah. And man, if I'm rigid on that attachment to like, oh, this is what an entrepreneur does, and this is how I work, and this is what I should be doing and what I need to be doing, I quickly find myself in hell, number one, and two, access to no resourcefulness, no real creativity. Yeah. And so one of the greatest things that I've been doing in line with what you've been saying is allowing myself to detach and practice non-attachment to this idea of how I should show up as an entrepreneur in my business. And actually realize that maybe I don't know what truly will create success. Yeah. Linearly, I have an idea that if I do these things and I do this thing and it can create this. Yes. But what if all of a sudden, just like you're saying, I have a feeling that I'm burnt out, or, God, I'm feeling guilty stepping away from something. I step out and I go for a walk in the forest for 4 hours, go swim in a river, and I come back and there's an idea that blooms forth that creates an exponential leap in terms of something that happens in my work. Like, I deny that possibility by being attached to the identity of how I think I should be showing up as an entrepreneur or as Clayton, you know, on the cusp of 40. So yes. I totally hear you, man. I like my experience is, and I don't think I've fully integrated this because I still sometimes struggle with it, is that the times that I'm most obsessed about like what I should be doing or certain tasks is actually the most time that I need to do the thing you're talking about, right? Like go in to do something very different, go shop, go travel, go jump in the river, to use your metaphor. And nearly always then when I come back, I'm not so anxious. It's like the thing that I thought was like a huge problem. It's sort of like, it might still need to get done, but it's not a preoccupying thing in the same way. Yeah. It's like you're changing your way of being by listening. Yeah. Yeah. And not trying to force something. And that's another thing too, is like this attachment comes with this element of like force, like where we start to try to force something versus I think what you're speaking to is like, I'm going to surrender this. I'm going to surrender this and I'm going to allow it to constellate in a whole new way. God, it really is letting go of knowing, thinking I know how this is going to happen. I know I'm going to get in relationship by going on this amount of dates. It's a numbers game. I know that I need to, have this happen and they need to say this in order to have this happen. And what a limited, forceful way of showing up to something that is so organic and artistic. And, I don't say that in any type of blame to anybody that finds themselves in that perspective, because I find myself in that perspective. I found myself in that perspective. Totally. It's a practice of noticing it and then choosing something different. Yeah. Right on. Yeah. I like that. That's wholesome. So we are at the 55-minute mark, almost at the top of the hour. Jack, is there any final words that you want to put out there? We've got a bunch of people. Just as you think about that, let me just say some shout outs. Ardren, hey, thanks for joining. Lovely to see you and your comments. Shubik, excuse me if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. Greetings. She's from London. Julia, Candy, Gina, Costello, Duck with Hat. Hello. And NJ Diabetes Education. Hey, good to see you here. Thanks for joining. And we've got about 34 people that have been
right on. Appreciate that. So the thing that comes up for me is the metaphor of the rowing boat in the river. So part of through me is that you're doing your best to align with the current, even whilst you also have your paddle, so you can steer, but you basically say, I don't want to be constantly rowing against the current. Whereas in that by me reality, sometimes you might match the current and therefore you're rowing really well and really hard, but there might be other times where you're actually rowing against the current and you haven't acknowledged it. And so you're going to risk forcing it, to use your language, right? So there are currents in life. And this is sort of saying, hey, yeah, sometimes we want to align with them. We don't just let the current take us fully, in the sense that we still have a paddle, right? We still have some agency. We still have some choices. We still have decision-making capacities, discernment, wisdom. But we maybe say, I don't want to just keep forcing against the flow of my life. And if it's really true that I don't fully know who I'm becoming, then at some level, deep level, I've also got to let life flow through me, right? Because I might otherwise, to use your thing, like have an outdated idea of who I am that I'm continuing to force on the present, because that's who I once was. Whereas what I hear you talking about, non-attachment, or in my language, disidentifying from a previous identity, that's one of the most powerful things that you can do in your development. And that's one of the most powerful reasons to hire a coach, I believe, is to help you do that.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, thank you. I love that that metaphor of the boat and the river. Yeah, it really lands, and I think really encompasses life as the river, our conscious mind as the rower, and how are we in relationship with the current. Jack, are you, where can people find you if they want to listen to more of your wisdom and tap into your insights?
Yeah. So online, you can find me at jackbutler.com.
Cool.
And on YouTube, you can find my channel. I don't know if you're going to link it. That might be the easiest way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So just beneath the video. Yeah, cool. I'd love to connect with anyone if this is vibing, resonating, continue the conversation.
Jack, are you taking on any clients at this time?
I am open for clients currently.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So if you really feel like you resonated with just the cadence, the perspective that Jack has to offer, reach out to him. All the details will be in the description. And if you'd like to enter into a conversation with me, I'll put my contact below as well.
Right on.
Please comment, like the video, subscribe for more insights like this. Jack, I'd love to have you back again sometime
soon. Man.
Your channel. So this is awesome, man. Love it. Thanks for coming on.
Enjoyed
and thank you all for showing up and giving us your attention.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Bye.
Ciao.